Victorians were very big on baking. For Jubilee, they even had baking competitions with cash prizes equivalent to a year's salary. One baker is known to have made 100 tonnes of cakes for the Jubilee. To give your Jubilee festivities this 1897 celebratory feel, I'm going to show you how to make traditional Victoria sponge sandwiches, just as Queen Victoria herself would have enjoyed them. First of all, you'll need to preheat your oven to 180 degrees C, or 350 Fahrenheit or gas mark 4. The Victorians wouldn't need to do this, as they had coal-fired ovens that were constantly hot. Modern Victoria sponges tend to be large, round cakes, but in Victoria's day they would be more likely to be made in a large rectangular or square baking tin and then cut into fingers, something like this. Grease your tin using butter and sugar. The sugar will give the sponge a lovely, crispy meringue-like coating. Our main ingredients are 6 eggs, 12 ounces or 675 grams of caster sugar, 8 ounces or a pound of flour. Though modern versions of the Victoria sponge use fat, the Victorians often didn't. We're going to make a Victoria sandwich without butter, delicious and better for our waistlines. To make their cakes rise, the Victorians would simply whisk their eggs in a copper bowl. The egg and the copper react to create a self-raising agent. The eggs need to be whisked for at least 5 minutes until they turn into a stiff foam. You can squeeze in a few drops of lemon juice to help the raising along a little if you don't have a copper bowl. If it's easier, you can always add a little baking powder later on. About half a teaspoon will do the job. Next, with your hands, mix the caster sugar into the whisked eggs. Then, mix in the flour by hand too. This is a great way of combining the ingredients. At this stage, you can add a couple of tablespoons of ground almonds to the recipe. The Victorian middle classes often did this to help the sponge cake to keep for longer. Finally, for total authenticity, add a couple of teaspoons of orange flower water. This ingredient is generally used in the perfume industry and provides a delicious aroma to this dessert. Nowadays, you can find it in most supermarkets. Pour your mixture into the baking tin. Then, place a folded wet cloth around the edge of the tin and pin it in place. This will keep the top of the cake flat. I'm using butter muslin or cheesecloth, but you can buy modern cake bands that do the same thing. Now, just pop the sponge in the oven for about 30 minutes. Take it out of the oven. You can use a skewer to test it. Put it in, and if it comes out dry, then it's ready. Then let it cool and cut it in half. Cut it into pieces to look like finger sandwiches. You should be able to make about 10 or 20 servings depending on how long you have made your sandwiches. Now it's time to fill each sandwich with a preserve. You can fill each one with a different jam or use the same one for all of them. It's up to you. Now you have your fingers, it's time to think about how to display them. For Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, people would have created the most amazing displays of delicious cakes and desserts. You can find out more about how people celebrated the Jubilee in the Jubilee View from the Crowd exhibition at Kensington Palace. For these cakes, I'd recommend stacking them one on top of the other, like this, to provide a delightful centrepiece to your street party. Enjoy the Victoria sponge fingers for your Jubilee celebrations and beyond. And do remember, there are lots of other Victorian party guides, from making bunting to dancing. Just visit the Historic Royal Palace's website, hrp.org.uk, and search for Victorian party tips.